Architecture as living history. This is another primary source topic that I know students will enjoy. They'll be learning something that they hadn't ever learned before, and on the teacher's part, the teacher also has to learn a few things, knowledge of architectural styles and characteristics, but this is not a difficult task and relatively easy to research. In my country, in Canada, the history of the 19th century and early 20th century can be examined through architecture. And basically, over that time period, these buildings have gone from basic to extreme, functional to ornate, small to large, and history is the engine that caused that to happen. So students certainly can appreciate the movement from log cabin to high Victorian architecture, and society moved from a simple one to a more sophisticated one over that period of time. The styles that I used, and I'd use each style one class at a time, log cabin, Georgian, Regency, Gothic, Classical, and High Victorian. And I would look at the style itself and relate it to the change in the development of the economy and the movement of society during the 19th century. So using some of the architectural terminology to do the job as far as the styles is relatively easy. You can look up that kind of information and go from there. One focus that I always found interesting with the students after we dealt with these styles, if you look at the government buildings in Canada compared to that of the United States, it really reflects the history of the two countries. So in Canada's case, the Parliament buildings being a Gothic architecture with very high towers and turrets pointing upwards, and the American public buildings being more of a classical style with rotundas and porticos and rounded windows. You have a result of the two histories showing up because of those different styles. In the case of Canada, there was no revolution. There was a loyalty to England. There was a use of the English style of government, and also the buildings showing power from above. The monarchy down through Parliament down to the people, and so power from above reflected in the Gothic architecture without a revolution. In the United States, where there was a revolution, the desire was to keep the government buildings more of a classical style, the Greek democracy, demos meaning democracy, open to the people, flatter down, rounded porticos, rounded windows. And so the whole result was this reflection of architecture in the result of the history of the Revolution experience. So I think that that can be a way of having students realize how history does influence the way we live in our architecture and our structures. Some of the best work done by my students was, in using the primary sources, was using, taking a well-known person, dealing with that person in terms of research, in terms of their lifestyle and where they worked and what they did, and also the kind of home they lived in. And so some of the projects that were done for me involved this whole package of dealing with a home and analyzing it architecturally, looking at who lived in it and looking at the historical time period that they were in. And the results were often spectacular. Students often got into it in great depth, and so I was fortunate to have some very committed students to do a great job on these things, and they were recognized in the community. If you move the whole concept over to another subject area, like art, for example, the art teacher could use historical buildings to have their students do sketches and drawings. The technical studies people could have a focus on drawing the architectural plans and looking at the styles and the kinds of technology that were used to build it. So the possibilities are really unlimited for the creative teacher and the students in this type of study. Why is this so attractive for students? I think they see it as relevant, shows them the exciting possibilities in making their subject studies more meaningful. Using primary sources gives the student a hands-on approach, and it's a very interesting approach. In most cases, it's something they've not been exposed to before. So I had students over the years tell me all kinds of stories, and one was a girl who was driving down the street with her mother, and she would point to an architectural characteristic like the top of a gable, and I think her mother was impressed that she would know this kind of thing. I had another group of students who were concerned about the demolition of a particular home, and one of the only Gothic revival structures, heritage home in the city, and they sent letters to the city, and they took pictures inside and documented everything, and theirs was the last known record of the interior of that building. Also had a well-known home that was being demolished, and a student went there every day to take a picture to get a record of its demolition and save it for posterity. So students get into it in all kinds of different ways, and it's really been a great experience for both of the teacher and the student. Something you might want to try, and you can do it in a more limited way. You can look at particular style of building just related to government, for example, and relate that to the history of the country. Next day we're going to look at the cemetery as a primary source.